Hello and welcome back to From Trauma to CEO. Today, I want to speak with you about a topic that each and one of us at some point in our lives would have struggled with, and a topic that is often misunderstood. I'm speaking about visibility. We tend to treat it like a professional skill, like something that you learn, you refine, and eventually can master. But in reality, visibility is far more intimate than that, because to be visible is to be revealed. And for many accomplished, deeply capable individuals, that is precisely where the nervous system begins to negotiate. And in my experience, the conversation around visibility has very little to do with a strategy or even with mindset, and everything to do with self-trust, with the internal permission to show up without needing to perform, without self-editing, and without abandoning parts of ourselves in order to be accepted. And that is exactly where today's conversation lives. I'm joined by Anna Holtzman, a licensed psychologist and a coach who helps high functioning women, creative women, and entrepreneurs move through fears of visibility and into a truer expansion of their work and their identity. Now, before this chapter of her career, Anna spent over 15 years in TV and publishing. That's exactly where the space where visibility is constant and performance is often rewarded. Along the way, she experienced firsthand how burnout, chronic pain, and repeated silencing can emerge when success is shaped more by pressure than by self-trust or joyfulness, for that matter. Her own healing guided her towards nervous system informed tools that helped her reconnect with her voice and show up more authentically in her work. Now, today, she supports people, individuals in going through imposter syndrome and bringing their most authentic visions to life and allowing themselves to be seen without needing to perform. She's also the host of the podcast, How to Trust Yourself, where she explores the deeper understanding of internal authority and what it truly means to trust yourself and to be more visible. Anna, I'm so glad to have you here today. Thank you for joining me.
Aria, I'm so glad to be here with you today. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's my absolute pleasure. I am excited about speaking with you about all things visibility related. But most importantly, I want to start with, we briefly touched on it, but I want you to go into a little bit of a detail as to what led you to this work where you are doing now, helping sensitive creatives and entrepreneurs use nervous system tools to work through all the fears around visibility and how they can become more authentically themselves. I love to hear your journey and what led you to this kind of work.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to speak about that. And before I go into it, I just want to start by saying I loved that you said, and I wrote it down, to be visible is to be revealed. And I work with this stuff not because I have no problems with visibility. I work with it because it's something that I continue to struggle with and therefore have to really pay attention to and develop tools to help myself through. So that's why I love supporting clients with this. And it made me think of coming on to be on this podcast with you today. I happen to have a lot of chaotic stuff going on in my personal life at the moment. Everything is like rushing here, rushing there. And when it came to sit down to log into our recording, I had the thought like, oh, I'm going to be speaking with Faria on this podcast, and I wish I had my act together today. I wish I felt grounded and settled and all this stuff. And what that's really about, and I love the way you phrased it, is, not wanting to be revealed, thinking about visibility as I've got to put on my mask and be perfect. And I think a lot of us instinctively think of it that way, or we're conditioned to think of it that way. And that
Yeah.
makes it feel really scary.
Yeah,
Because we
absolutely.
are.
I mean, we are human and messy. And as you witnessed earlier, I went through the beginning. I had to go through the beginning of introducing you a couple of times because my mind was a little bit scattered and it took me a minute to gather myself. And that's exactly it. To appear as we are is somehow has been programmed that it's not okay, that it has
Yeah.
to be the performative parts of us. And in reality, and I'm sure you experience that on a daily basis, what really lands with clients, with the work that we do, is when you show up as your authentic self with all the messy parts and with everything, right?
It's what makes us feel connected, right? It's like I often say to clients that when we're dealing with interpersonal stuff, we humans, we're like tuning forks. We pick up and replicate unconsciously each other's vibrations. And I know that when I'm masking myself and trying to hold it all together and be perfect and not show my messiness, everyone who's in my presence or who's listening to me feels that tension in their own body too. And when I do the thing
Absolutely.
that my programming thinks I'm not allowed to do, and everyone will hate me if I just let the mess out, that's when everyone together breathes a sigh of relief, and suddenly we're out of disconnection and into connection with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know that you had gone through your own process. And of
Yeah.
course, like everything else, this is a kind of ongoing thing that we experience, especially as we reveal different layers of ourselves. What it
Yeah.
means is that a new kind of fear of visibility, a new appears, right? And
Yes.
you, as you mentioned, you firsthand had gone through something that was so performative and exposing. So I
Yeah.
love to hear a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. So I'll tell a version of the story of how I got to what I'm doing now, highly embedded with metaphor, but this is a framing of how it really happened. So my prior career to this was working in television. And yeah, before that, I worked in publishing. For 10 of my years working in media, I worked in reality television. I worked as a video editor. This is an extremely high pressure world. You need to be creative and think on your feet, but you need to be extremely fast. You need to do your creative work in front of other people. There's always eyes right over your shoulder staring at your work as you're working. It's just a pressure cooker. And it's an
Yeah.
environment where you see people being fired on at the drop of a hat on a daily basis. So
Mm,
you're always knowing that could happen to you too. And in this environment, it's just natural. I was striving to be perfect, and nobody's perfect, but I managed to be very successful in this career. And that involved a lot of holding it together, like this
mm,
visibility masking that we're talking about, trying to never
yes.
make a mistake, never reveal what's going on inside. And that can be extremely painful, right? And we can start to deteriorate in our health when we're holding all of that tension. Many people experience this in a wide variety of different ways. Some are more easy to recognize than others, but it just so happens that my experience is makes an easy metaphor because on my literally very first day of work in that career, I experienced my first migraine attack. I had never
Oh,
experienced something like that before. It was not part of my health stuff. But on that first day of the job, I experienced such anxiety and I was striving to be perfect straight out of the gate. And so my nervous system just really freaked out. I got an extremely overpowering migraine headache. So, this was something that then followed me throughout the 10 years that I worked in TV. And in the beginning, it wasn't something that was a big part of my life. It was just something I would experience periodically when stress and tension would build, particularly at work. I would
mm,
experience these attacks once in a while, and they gradually became more frequent, I would say, as tension became a more and more regular routine part of what was going on in my nervous system. After 10 years of working in this field, I always wanted to be a director. That was my goal. And I was striving
mhm,
for that the whole time. After 10 years, that the director career had not taken off. It wasn't happening. And I thought, I can't spend the rest of my life editing reality TV. This was not my end goal. I need to do something different.
mhm,
In the meantime, I had entered into therapy for personal reasons not related to
Sure.
work. I found it to be a very interesting, fascinating, stimulating process. And I thought television is about telling people stories, understanding human behavior, and therapy, although very different in many ways, has
Mhm.
those elements. And maybe this is something that I could do. So I eventually left TV and first got a life coaching certification and then finally went back to graduate school to become a therapist. And here's where things get interesting and unexpected. I thought when I leave TV and I enter this field that's all about feelings and expressing ourselves and being in tune with ourselves, maybe the migraines will go away because the tension will decrease. But what happened, in
Mhm.
fact, was the exact opposite of that. It wasn't until I was in graduate school that the migraines really took over my life in a scary way, where I was being like taken fully flat out, sometimes 3 days a week. I was not able to show up reliably for my classes or for my clinical internship. And it felt like life was closing in on me. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, but looking back on it now from the other side of all that, I think what was happening is that I thought I was going into a situation where I'd be expressing my feelings and in tune with myself and comfortable being seen exactly as I am. But in
Mm.
fact, graduate school has its own code of conduct, its own rules, its own particular ways of seeing things that were not always in tune with my way of seeing things or my way of
Sure.
expressing myself. In order to achieve the grades and the degree, I had to, or I felt I had to conform myself to the environment and keep my authenticity under wraps at times. I think that being in an environment where I was like on the verge of feeling I could express myself, but then retracted and masked it again, it just created this huge inner tension that for me
Yeah.
happened to manifest as these migraine headaches.
Yeah, this is fascinating because, and also very much aligned with everything that we talk about, right? That fear of visibility, that being trained to be ourselves and bring all parts of ourselves into the equation. It's something internal. So it would follow us wherever we go, right? Yes, some circumstances, some positions or jobs or situations would highlight that a lot more. But essentially, that programming, whatever that may be, is internal. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out because that is the thing that a lot of the times it gets misunderstood, that keeping boundaries where you're not supposed to be visible in every situation. You're supposed to know exactly where it is safe, like really safe, not just in our own head, to be visible and where it really is not. And sometimes when we talk about visibility, actually people who teach these kind of things, right, they tend to go all in about becoming visible, becoming your authentic selves. And now, of course, that's the aim, but we also have to understand and measure where that visibility will be received safely by our external environment as well. And sometimes people just go full in, and I'm sure you've seen it too. I'm just being my authentic self. And then they burn bridges, they go completely the other way around.
Yes.
And there is that balance, understanding first that programming is within yourself. Secondly, knowing exactly how to navigate through different situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. It's interesting. I love having these kind of conversations because it always brings a new layer of understanding for my
Yeah.
own human experience as we're talking about these things. And what's coming to me now, so where my story took a turn is that because the migraines became such a life interrupting thing during my grad school, I went in search of some kind of a solution, some way out of this. Fortunately, in my search, I discovered this whole world of mind body medicine for chronic pain, for working with the nervous system. And it was a body of work that I really deeply connected with,
Mhm.
ultimately led me down a path out of the chronic cycle and into greater physical ease. A big part of that process for me had to do with internal visibility, with recognizing what was happening inside of myself emotionally, which I thought I was already doing. I was in school to become a therapist. I had been in therapy for many years. But this work drew me into a much deeper dialogue with myself, where I was having inner dialogues, becoming my own therapist in a way, sitting with myself and truly listening, letting myself be seen by my own self, and
Yeah.
bringing compassion to myself. So it was that internal safety with visibility that had to be built before external visibility could feel safe for me. Because looking back, what I was really unconsciously hoping for in grad school is that I would just dump all of my feelings and they would be held safely with compassion by whoever was around, without having those tools to first navigate that within myself.
Yeah. In my experience with my own kind of clients and everybody that I work with, visibility, the fear of visibility is not usually about the fear of being seen, but it's about the fear of being seen for who we are or who we believe that we are. So that's when things get tricky, because again, and I'm sure you come across individuals that are going, okay, I am visible. Most of the people that I work with are entrepreneurs or business owners or high achievers in general. And they are on the outside, they are very confident, right? And they go, okay, but I don't have fear around visibility. I do these presentations. I do this. I'm able to sell my services and all of that and be visible. But that's I guess, the first and a little bit on a surface layer of visibility. And exactly what you're referring to, that visibility is not just about being seen, it's about the fear of being seen for who we think we are. And that's when all the programming and everything comes into play. And then we get ourselves all worked up.
Yeah, I love the way you described it. And it made me think also, like, it's usually, like you said, it's not the fear of being seen, it's the fear of being found out.
Yeah.
It's the fear of having parts of ourselves revealed that we have not developed love and acceptance for yet. And I'll share just like a little example of this from my own journey. So when I finished grad school and I was starting to recover from the chronic migraines, that recovery was just so impactful for me that I decided to make that the focus of my work. And for the first 5 years of my practice, I was helping people recover or experience a reduction of chronic pain symptoms. And I was still very much in my own healing process. I was still very much experiencing flare-ups as I was going through it. I felt that I needed to cover that up. I thought that in order to help other people, I needed to appear as though I was perfectly healed and recovered, which of course was actually creating a lot of internal tension, and it was feeding into my symptoms and making them worse. And what I discovered along the way is that the work that I had to do was I had to develop love and compassion for myself while I was experiencing pain. I had to shift my mentality to, can I be perfect and out of pain all the time, to, can I love and accept myself however I am and however I'm feeling in this moment? And if I can, not only does everything feel easier, but visibility feels safer because I love who I am in this moment. It also made it safer for the clients that I was working with, because now I'm modeling that self-acceptance, modeling that I still love myself even when things feel like a mess today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And also, like, the pain is such an intelligent messenger, right? When we go through some of the seemingly unexplained pain, I think that's when we need to really focus and really look at what else is happening in our lives. Now, with your kind of process, I went through all different versions of that myself, as I think most people do. What do you think, what do you believe your pain was protecting you from before you were ready to actually fully see it or listen to it.
Yeah, and those are the exact words I actually use in my journaling, which is no longer these days about physical pain, but it's about whatever
Yeah.
emotional pain or fear is coming up for me now. But I would ask the pain, dear pain, what are you protecting me from? And what I nearly always find is that tension or pain or fear or worry or masking, it's trying to protect me from rejection. It's trying
Mm.
to protect me from being disliked or misunderstood or cast out of the group or being in disconnection from other human beings. And
Yeah.
the irony of it is, it's trying to protect me by keeping me separate from other people, from not revealing myself to other people, which prevents me from connecting with other people.
And by keeping you also small, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the, I think I would have, might have mentioned it in one of the podcast episodes, either in this one or when I was a guest, that when I was training, this is many years ago, to be a psychologist, I remember being in the class and I never volunteered to any kind of comments or anything. But it wasn't because I was shy, or at least not how I understood it. To me, everything, I just felt like anything I had to say was already obvious. Everybody knew it. So it wasn't anything profound. And it was so interesting because when I started going through my own process, especially as my work and a lot of the success would depend on becoming more visible, I realized that I'm still carrying like this very outdated story, which I actually completely forgotten about, right? I linked this to many different things, but what it actually was. And when I remembered it, because grew up in a very community like space. So me and my cousins would always hang out together. And I was the youngest amongst that circle of cousins. And every time I had something interesting or I would come across something that I thought it was fascinating, I would proudly run and try to let them know that, hey, I know this thing, only to be dismissed as everybody knows that. You're just such a baby. You don't even know these things yet. And then I think after a while, I just didn't, because I felt like it was going to be received and I'm going to be shamed, especially in front of other kids. If there were other kids involved, that was the end of me. I would be so embarrassed. So it was, and then I completely forgot about, because this doesn't even sound like a traumatic experience as such, right? This is just kids growing up together and playing. And they were not being horrible or anything. It was just that they genuinely thought, and now looking back, of course it would have been, would have appeared stupid to them. So I carried that. And sometimes, believe it or not, I have to check in with myself even today when I'm about to do a training or speak to an audience. I have to check like, okay, do everybody, and then over time, I get evidence against it, which helped me a great deal. But it stayed with me all the way to my adult life and to when I started university. And it was only when I would whisper my insight or whatever to the person next to me, and they would be so impressed, that I felt a little bit safer, a little bit more brave to start voicing my opinions. But like, this is the whole, sometimes we're not even, the smallest thing, something that found its way in our psyche, in our programming, and it just stayed there, never visited until we had to expose ourselves in a way.
I relate to that so much. I have a story that is so similar to that. And it wasn't, I think it came out in a session with my own coach a couple of years ago. My goodness, this story is right there under the surface. And like you said, it's not because it was a big trauma, but it's more just like an experiences get coded in the nervous system and they influence our reflexes. So I think about it like when I was a young kid, I got stung by a bee, and it was not a horrible traumatic experience, but it was unpleasant and my body
Mm.
didn't want to experience it again. So thereafter, whenever a bee would fly by me, I wasn't even thinking about that experience. It's just more of a reflex. My body would flinch
Mm.
and move away. And I think
Yeah.
it's the same process with
Mm.
is like visibility wound experiences. For me,
Absolutely.
the one that comes to mind that feels so similar, when I was in second grade, I loved raising my hand in class in school. Like I love, like I know the answer and call on me. Like you said, I felt exuberant, enthusiastic, like I'm contributing something, I'm expressing myself, and that feels
Yeah.
good and open. And then one day, my teacher, who I really admired, probably was in a bad mood that day, and she turned to me and she said, "And nobody likes a know-it-all."
Oh
Oh, I felt
no.
so humiliated. Like this desire to express myself is bad and I'm a bad person. Just
Yeah.
so it wasn't a story that I thought about very often, but it was there under the surface, doing these
Yes.
like reflex recoiling from participating.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And you come across it, and you might not even need to revisit this particular experience until you're stepping into a level of expansion that requires you to reveal yourself or to, this is, I'm sure this is your experience as well, that visibility has so many different layers. And it's not so much that, oh, I don't have a problem speaking up in front of people. That's not what we are speaking about. It's about really, truly becoming visible and for who we are rather than what we say and what we hide behind. And I think that's the real difference. And I'm curious though to know, again, in my experience, visibility, the fear of visibility or the courage to become visible has a lot to do with identity rupture. When we associate ourselves with a certain kind of identity, coming out, moving away from that, rupturing that is sometimes it's a heavy thing for a lot of people to engage with. Is that your experience with your kind of the work that you do with people as well? Do you find that the identity and visibility, they go hand in hand?
Yes. And I'm not sure if what I'm about to say is, you can let me know if this is exactly what you're talking about or a little bit of a tangent. But many of the clients that I work with, they're stepping into a new identity. Oftentimes, that stepping into a different professional role or one with greater authority, or they're changing their life in some significant way. And there's fear that comes up around showing up in a new identity, that this isn't how people know me. It's also something that I've experienced numerous times because I've changed careers a number of times, and several of them were quite dramatic. So, moving from a snooty intellectual corner of publishing into reality TV, which is a
Yeah.
very different atmosphere, and then moving from that into therapy, which again is just like a different persona. I experienced a lot of discomfort in shifting the way that I am showing up, and the fear
Yes.
of like the people who accepted me in this other persona or this other role. It's still me, but this role attaches to your identity. And will I still be accepted as I'm moving
Mm.
into this new facet of my identity? I don't know if that's exactly what you were talking about or.
That is exactly what I'm talking about, that rupture of the identity and how, and a lot of the times the identity that we associated ourselves with is not really truly who we are, but who
Yeah.
we had to be at a certain situation, responding to a certain environment, right? So that's a whole different thing. But then now being committed to that identity, being visible as anything but that feels exposing and it feels very uncomfortable. And that identity rupture of who we thought we were, but a lot of the times that identity is not even exactly who we are, but rather who we had to be responding to that external situation or external environment. And now, because it happened for over a period of time, we mistake that with our own personality or identity. And
Yeah.
then we are committing to that. We are committed to that. So moving away from that and becoming visible for anything but that becomes challenging.
Yeah, I
So, yeah.
completely relate to that. I'm thinking of the juncture in my own path when I transitioned from working in reality TV to becoming a therapist. And when I was in TV, I was myself, but I was myself plus this persona of like brash, making
Yeah.
dirty jokes, just very irreverent. Certainly, some of that was me, but some of it was also to fit in with the environment there and to be accepted and prove that I'm tough and I don't give a shit and my feelings are
Mm.
not hurt by the harshness of the environment. Then when I shifted into becoming a therapist, I thought now to be taken seriously as a therapist, I need to change the style of clothes that I wear. I need to give up on those kind of like gritty clothes that I wore in TV and now wear flowing linens and shop at Eileen Fisher. And I need to make my voice really breathy and slow. And I was experimenting with that a little bit in the beginning till I realized like again with the physical things that the way my body speaks to me when it's feeling tense, I was getting a headache at the end of the day from speaking in a way that wasn't just me being me. And it was a
Yeah.
process of recognizing that, yes, there are certain ways to adapt to this role and this profession and this environment, but I can do it in a way that's just me showing up here. And I have to if I want this to be sustainable and if I want to feel connected to myself so I can also feel connected to the clients I'm working with.
Yes, I can completely relate to this conflict between who we truly are and who we think we are supposed to be out there in order to be respected, accepted, and all the other things, right?
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating that this is the part that you focus on the most with clients because this is the part that comes up, in my opinion, the most when, especially, in different layers. Can you tell me a little bit about exactly what it is that in what capacity do you do this work and how is this work delivered?
Yes. So, well, in broad strokes terms, I work with clients very intimately one on one, and I
Hmm.
also have groups that I work in. But what's interesting, and I think this goes along with everything we've been talking about, is that I'm not coaching clients on like practicing a speech or standing on stage. What
Hmm.
I'm much more often doing is I'm coaching them on their inner dialogue. So we're inviting in the fears, whatever fears are coming up around visibility. As human beings, I'll speak for myself. My first impulse is not to welcome those fears in. It's to try
Yeah.
to get them to leave, to
Hmm.
shut the door on them, to try to hide them under the desk.
Sure.
And when we do that, what I've learned is that our emotions, they behave exactly like as if your fear was another person that is
Hmm.
fearful. It was a friend that showed up at your door and it's, I'm scared. And then you try to slam the door in their face. That's going to escalate the situation and things are going to become more and more unworkable and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you open the door and say, oh, you're afraid? Well, I'm very busy, but I have time for you. Please come in. Let's sit on the sofa for a moment. I'll put a hand on your back. I know that whatever you're feeling is normal. Speak to me, share what's going on. That's when things start to soften and communication becomes possible again, and we can
Hmm.
move forward and we can get on that stage and make that speech if that's the type of visibility we're moving into.
Yeah.
So I'm coaching clients on creating that inner dialogue with their fear.
And that inner safety to
Yes,
to
the inner
allowing
safety.
allowing different parts to come out, and for that to be welcome, you're creating the foundation of the safety for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the surface of it, when we think of fear of visibility, we think fear of those outside of ourselves who might
Yeah.
be perceiving something in us. But underneath that, a lot of the times what's going on is there's self rejection, and that
Hmm.
creates a very unsafe environment internally. And so that's where we start, is welcoming in the fear.
That's great. And I also want to ask one last question.
Yeah.
I love this conversation. I feel like we can continue having
Me
this
too.
dialogue. But I promise this would be the last question. For anybody that's listening to this conversation, what are some of the signs that you would identify and spot as somebody who is ready for the expansion, somebody who is now ready to step into their next level of
Mm.
success, impact, financial expansion, whatever it may be? What are some of the signs that you recognize as that person being ready for that?
Yeah, ready to step into this work.
Yeah, ready to step in this work and ready
Yeah.
to step into their own expansion.
Yes. I think it's a feeling that we all know, even if we don't know how to articulate it, where there's expansion is already happening inside of us.
Hmm.
So we feel it's like I describe it like there's like a balloon expanding inside my body. It
Hmm.
wants to come out, like my chest is expanding. I want to share something with the world. I
Yeah,
want to I want to breathe freely. I want to sing from a mountaintop, that kind of thing. But at the
yeah.
very same time, there's fear. And so it's like there's this net of tension that's holding me back. And the
Hmm.
pressure between the constriction of the fear and the expansion of the desire is creating a lot of discomfort. And what happens often during this juncture is that we find ourselves toggling back and forth. One minute, I have this big idea. I want to put it out there. I'm ready to go do the thing. But the next minute, I feel fearful and I contract and I want to stay
Yeah,
small and I just want to stay comfortable and hidden and just stay with what's familiar. And you might find yourself toggling back and forth or cycling back and forth. And that can go on for a very long time if we don't allow ourselves to receive support with it,
yeah.
which doesn't necessarily have to look like working with me or with you, but it can. It
Mhm.
can also be the support of a friend, just letting someone into the process with you.
Yes, and just knowing what the process is and then going through the process. I love that. And for anybody that's listening to your amazing work, how can I will leave all your details in the show notes and where to find you, but where can they, and also I know that you had a gift
A
for
workshop.
yeah, our listeners. So if you, I will also leave that. So do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. If any of what I've been describing sounds like you're seeing yourself in some of it, and you're curious about what this inner dialogue with fear could look like, building a safe relationship with the fear. If you want to get a taste of that, I'd love to invite you into a workshop that I offer regularly. And when I'm not offering it live, you can watch a video version of it. And you can find that at annaholtzman.com/be seen. This work is called Let Yourself Be Seen.
Amazing. And I will leave that in the notes as well for anybody that wants to experience your magic firsthand.
Yes. And listeners, you're also welcome to email me. I answer every email. I love hearing from folks. And I'm at anna@annaholtzman.com. And you can also listen to my podcast,
Yes, I was
How
going to
to Trust
say.
Yourself, which I'm very excited to have Faria on soon. So you'll be able to hear that conversation.
Yes, and I love your podcast, and it's so real, and it touches on real issues, and I think it's very relatable as well as having depth, which I think it's a very rare combination at times.
A lot to me. I love what you're doing so much, Faria. And I'm so glad that we've connected and that I get to be here with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your wisdom and your insight. And I look forward to introducing your work to people and then for people to hear this amazing conversation, but then also follow through with other conversations, amazing conversations that you're having on your podcast. So thank you again for joining us. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you.